Excuse me. Hello, welcome to the Men's Mental Health panel hosted by the nonprofits Our Minds Matter, which is working towards the day when no teen dies by suicide, and The Hidden Opponent, an advocacy group that raises awareness for student-athlete mental health and addresses the stigma within sports culture. Globally, on average, one man dies by suicide every minute. Our Minds Matter and The Hidden Opponent teamed up this month to celebrate Movember, the leading charity changing the face of men's health and their efforts to speak up and save lives. Tonight, you'll hear from men from all walks of life share more of their story and how they've dealt with the stigma and stereotypes around being a man and seeking help. Welcome our panel moderator, Dr. Zach Mannes, who received his PhD in clinical and health psychology from the University of Florida College of Public Health and completed a postdoctoral clinical fellowship at the Yale School of Medicine. He is currently a postdoctoral fellow at the Department of Epidemiology at Columbia University, where he's conducting research examining the correlates and long-term consequences of substance use and depression amongst underrepresented populations, including veterans, racial and ethnic minorities, adults living with HIV, and former professional athletes.
Thanks so much, Rami. I'm Zach Mannes. I'll be the moderator this evening. Very excited to be here. We have a great panel lined up for everyone tonight, and for about the next hour, panelists will discuss their mental health experiences, and we'll also have an opportunity to answer audience questions. Throughout the panel, please write your questions in the Q&A section. If your question is for a specific panelist, please write their name along with the question. For general comments or agreements, please use the chat function to have dialogue with other participants. First, I'd just like to get started by getting to know the panelists a little bit better. They're going to share a little bit about what they do and why they do it, as well as why they chose their walkout songs. So first, we're going to start with Brendan, and then we'll go to Ryan, Jordan, Jimmy, and Andy. Brendan, would you like to start?
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Hi, everyone. Look, today I'm calling from Canberra, which is in the Australian Capital Territory, in between Melbourne and Sydney on the East Coast. It's almost summer here, so I don't have to rug up too much. Look, why do I do what I do? I've been working in suicide prevention for over 12 years. Initially in crisis support for an organisation that was equivalent to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline in the US, then in health promotion, and now at Movember. I believe that suicide is one of the biggest challenges of our time, and I also believe that it's mostly preventable. And the kind of work that Movember focuses on in the prevention and early intervention space is an area of great interest, and one that I think can really make a difference in this area. Things like strengthening informal community care. So by that I mean, we all have this natural set of resources, our eyes to notice that someone's not doing well, our mouths to ask the question, are you okay? And our ears to listen. And I think often those resources are held to ransom by fear and by stigma. So the work that Movember does, helps to give people confidence to get alongside someone they're worried about. Also, our work in education, our work in strengthening social connections and self-care. So that's why I do what I do. And Movember is one of the world's leading men's health charities. I really believe we have the opportunity to make a big difference in this space. And the song I chose was Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles. And I chose that because I have a brother with bipolar disorder. And my brother Damien, when he's in a very dark place, we often talk about the clouds and the greyness of where he's at. And I always remind him that the sun's going to come out again. And it does, inevitably. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks so much, Brendan. Looking forward to hearing more about Movember and your own personal experience with mental health. Ryan, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me, and all the viewers out there, thank you for attending. So I'm a big advocate for mental health because personally, I've went through it. So I'm actually a professional baseball player with the Arizona Diamondbacks, and when I was younger, my dad committed suicide when he was 14. So right when that happened, I was kind of thrown into it pretty quickly, and so I had one or two choices. I could either go to the right or go to the left, and I chose that sharing it and sharing my story was the thing that would lead me and others around me to find a path where they could relate to and help support. So that kind of leads into my walkout song, which is "Don't Stop Believing." It was my dad's favorite song, and so I just kind of kept rolling with it, and that's what I still plan to roll with it. So thank you guys for having me.
Thanks so much, Ryan, for sharing. And, I'm particularly looking forward to, you talking about mental health within the context of professional baseball. Jordan, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Zach. It's an honor to be on here with everyone. I'm really excited to share my perspective and to hear the perspective of everyone on this panel. So yeah, no, my name is Jordan, and thank you everyone who is attending right now and listening. I've been a public speaker on mental health and suicide prevention for 12 years now. And 13 years ago, I attempted suicide by going out of my 9-story bedroom window. And while I was in the hospital, I was approached by a reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper who actually asked my dad if he could interview me. And I said yes to that interview, thinking that was going to be the first and last time that I would share my story. But, I shared my story once, and all of a sudden it opened up the opportunity to share it to another person and another. And then all of a sudden, a year later, I was able to go and speak to my first high school presentation was October of 2008. And I remember getting done. I was terrified. And I remember afterwards, the line of students that came to talk to me afterwards. That's what made me realize I really wanted to dedicate my life to this. And so I've been fortunate enough to do that for the last 12 years. And so, yeah, I chose This Is America by Childish Gambino for my walkout song because we are talking about men today. And for me, one of the things that I'm very passionate about is bringing awareness and also attention to the need for mental health, especially in the Black community. And what Donald Glover talked about when talking about that song is making sure that he highlighted the importance for the value and the Black men who matter in this world, for them to have a voice as well. And so that's why I wanted to choose that song, because that song means a lot to me. That video means a lot to me. And bringing more awareness and attention to the Black community about mental health, but especially suicide prevention too, is something I'm very passionate about.
Thanks so much, Jordan. Very grateful, that you're here. I know it's very difficult. I know you've had a lot of experience talking about your story, but I imagine it continues to be difficult. And I really admire just how open you are doing it. All right, Jimmy.
Hi, Zach. So my name is Jimmy, and if you can't tell by the bags under my eyes, I'm a high school senior at Annandale High School, which is a suburb right outside of Washington, D.C. So I got involved with Our Minds Matter last year, and I started a branch of the club at my high school. And it honestly, it's, as many of you guys know, it's an amazing organization that's really doing hard work for young people and mental health advocacy. But as for my involvement with mental health advocacy, I think that a lot of it can be contributed to my life experiences, my families, and the identities that I hold, particularly just being a son of refugees from Vietnam. I think that my parents and my family have a very different perception of mental health and what is to be talked about with each other and what should just be kept inside. So for me, I think that the biggest difference between my parents and I when we talk about mental health is that my parents think that resiliency is just being strong all the time, not talking about things, keeping everything inside. But for me, I learned that resiliency is actually knowing how to deal with your mental health issues and having these conversations with other people and being authentic to yourself. So that's why I'm here today. And I'm really happy to see so many great panelists with their own take on this. And for my walkout song, I chose Don't Look Back in Anger by Oasis, because it's a kind of song that I'll shout in the car with my friends. It's a really good song, and it also has a really good message, because for me, in the past, I used to just be angry about everything instead of resolving problems. So it has a good message.
Thanks so much, Jimmy. I know there are high schoolers on the call, so your perspective is always valued, but definitely even more so over the next hour. And last but certainly not least, Andy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming to listen to all of our stories today. It really means a lot that people are willing to listen to us. My name's Andy Saul, and I'm a student at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. It's a small D3 school right in central Wisconsin. And my major is health promotion and wellness. I played football for my first 2 years here on campus. And I'm also a campus captain for the Hidden Opponent. So I think my mental health experience has to do more with my education, as well as some of the experiences that I've had with football and stuff like that. And my walkout song is Our Song by Taylor Swift. I am a huge Taylor Swift fan, wanted to keep it a little bit light too, so that's why I chose that one.
No shame. Definitely, she's one of the voices of our generation, so it's a good pick. So, for the first set of questions, I want to pose the same question to all the panelists because I think all of your perspectives are going to be quite different and all valued. And I just want to start off by, asking everybody about, their mental health experience and, what mental health, means to them. Brendan, would you like to start?
Yeah, for sure. Look, mental health really is about being able to, contribute, and it's not just about what's, kind of going on in your own head. It's about having your strong social connections. It's about getting up every day and doing something meaningful, or at least striving to do that. My experience around mental health, having been an advocate for positive mental health and suicide prevention, is really about kind of walking the talk. And I think sometimes if you're not careful, you can spend a lot of time in this space, working in this space, and actually forget about yourself from time to time. We talk about this idea of the plumber's or the electrician's wiring, or the plumber's kitchen, or the mechanic's car. They're so good going out fixing everyone else's stuff and not looking after their own. When I first started in mental health, my CEO at the time, awesome lady, her name was Dawn O'Neill, told me about this idea called vicarious trauma, where you're going to be hearing lots and lots of stories and experiences from people. And if you don't look after yourself, it will creep up on you and it'll ambush you. And that's exactly what happened to me about midway through the 12 years that I've been in this space. And it was a real wake-up call. And it really demonstrated to me that we need to tune ourselves up in the same way that we get our car serviced. We don't wait till it breaks down. So I access professional support, even when I'm not feeling unwell or out of sorts or bent out of shape. I will talk, and I'll talk to my wife, talk to my kids, I'll talk to my family. That's how I look, and that's how I manage and keep myself buoyant.
Yeah. So Brendan, I want to ask you a follow-up question, and if all the panelists can, elaborate on this question as well in their responses, I think this would be really helpful. We have a question from Max, and he asks, what is it so challenging specifically about men to open up and talk about their mental health issues? What differentiates men from women?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. It's something that Movember are very, very focused on. So boys and men are socialized into kind of what we call this dominant masculinity, where strength, stoicism, self-reliance, being strong are really, they're great things to have, but quite often we have them so entrenched in our being that we're actually not that good at coping with a crisis or key transition points in our life. And my experience, particularly with working for the equivalent of the American Suicide Prevention Helpline, was We used to get about 70% of our calls from 2,500 Australians in crisis a day, and 70% of those calls were from females. 30% were from men or boys. Not because men or boys have more issues, because they're just not as willing to put their hand up and say, hey, I'm not doing so well. I think we're starting to come some way. The idea of a forum like this 20 years ago, well, for starters, we didn't have Zoom, so it would have been a bit hard, but it just wouldn't have happened. We're talking about this more and more. We've got all of you guys. We've got Ryan, Andy, Jimmy, Jordan, everyone, willing to put their hand up and share their story, and that enables people to look and say, you know what, I'm not alone. There's people that have gone through this, that have been to the absolute edge, and they've come back, and now they're using their experience to help others.
Thanks so much, Brendan. Ryan, what about you? What do you think makes it particularly difficult for men to open up about their mental health? And, is that even more difficult, being a professional athlete in a team-based atmosphere?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that like there's a huge stigma around men when it comes to there's a pride aspect to it, that in order to be a man, you got to like hide your feelings and just like go and do whatever you got to do and just block out the feelings. Like, I think it's the opposite nowadays. I mean, I think honestly, it shows that you're more of a man if you can actually own up to what you're going through and be like, you know what, I need help. And I think that's tough to do. I know for me, it's taken years, and that's okay. Understanding that where you're at in life and who's around you is important. And to touch on the professional athlete aspect of it, when you're in a clubhouse with 30 guys, I mean, there's so much, first off, there's so much testosterone in the building that it's like everyone's got an opinion. And so I think for me, being able to relate to my teammates and for them to know my story and know what I've went through, personally, for me, it makes it a little easier for me to talk about my feelings with them, because I think there's a certain respect level because I've been through what I have. And so they feel comfortable coming to me because they know that I'm not going to judge, and they know that I'm strong and I've accomplished what I have. So they feel that I have the tools that they might need. So
Thanks for sharing, Ryan. Jordan, what about you? What has been particularly difficult for you to open up about your mental health, if you have those challenges, and then more generally, what do you think makes it difficult for men to open up about their mental health?
I think for men, we're just not geared necessarily to just open up and talk about a lot of things in the way like I see my wife and her best friend. Like her best friend just comes here and they just talk for like hours. They don't go anywhere. There's no event to go to. They just talk about all the things that they're going through and processing. I golf. My best friend, we golf together for 4 hours, and at the end of it, I can't even come home and say exactly all the things we talked about because it might just only be a few things that we share. The rest of the time, we're talking about golf. Every once in a while, we get in depth about feelings or something that we're going through. So it was a learning process for me because when I was a teenager, I just thought, all right, well, drinking is what I would turn to open up and have a conversation with my guy friends because that's the only time we did that. And it goes to men not necessarily knowing or having the best coping skills when it comes to feeling sad, feeling depressed, dealing with a mental health disorder. So a lot of times when I was younger, that's what I would lean to are healthy coping skills that I would try and use. Like sometimes it was an escape, sometimes it was distraction, like talking to my friends while we're playing sports, but I'd never really invested in my mental health so that I could take things day at a time. I could be honest with my friends. I could be honest with my therapist. All the things that I needed to take care of my mental health, I struggled with because as a kid, I just wasn't taught that. I think this generation today is really redefining what a man is. I think that's a really important part of this is that today in 2020, I think it is somewhat normal for a man to talk about his feelings and his emotions in front of people. And being able to have that conversation is a healthy thing. And normalizing that conversation, I think, is what we need to get to. So I think for me, what I struggled with the most was How do I have that safe space to talk about my feelings and emotions in a confident way and not necessarily turning to negative coping skills that I used to use, when I was younger?
Yeah, it's definitely not natural for a lot of guys to open up and talk about their emotions, especially when it's unprompted and people don't, go out of their way to ask us. But it seems like, with your story in particular, it's gotten much easier to open up over the course of time because you've become more comfortable and more confident in yourself, and it's something that you're more used to doing now. Jimmy, what about you? What has been difficult for you in terms of opening up about your mental health, and what do you think is difficult generally for men about opening up?
Yeah, well, I think Jordan and everyone else who just went before me summed it up pretty well. There's definitely been a lot of like hesitation for me to just talk about things and talk about how I really feel, at least more so like when I was younger, just because like like at school it was like the norm. Like if you're a guy, you shouldn't be talking about like these things. Like you should just be like, I don't know, playing sports, having fun. And I think that you can see like this like lack of intimacy almost between like two male friends sometimes, just because it is like this uncommon thing to talk about what you're actually thinking. And I can't lie, it's pretty bad. And I wish it wasn't like that in society. I wish people were more open to things, but I think in my life I have taken steps to deconstruct that, just because of how unhealthy I saw it was. And I saw like through other examples of people being vulnerable with each other and acknowledging that vulnerability is a strength rather than a weakness. That was something that was really important to me. So with my friendships and with my relationships, I try to have these conversations and talk about what's really going on, because I think that that is real intimacy between friends. And yeah, it's definitely something I'm working on, just because of all the stigma of like, if you have feelings, you're weak. If you're this and that, then like you're not a real man. Tough it out. All these like terrible things that have happened. And yeah.
Well, Jimmy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I had a chance to listen to your pre-panel interview, and in that interview, you talked a little bit about your parents and how your parents have influenced your conceptualization of mental health and your own mental health experience. And we do have a question from Max here. To what extent does a person's family influence their perception of mental health? And if you feel comfortable answering, I'd like to start with you. And then Andy, I know, we'll definitely come to you as well, but if anyone else wants to jump in and talk about sort of their relationship with their family members and how that's influenced their mental health experience, please jump in.
Yeah, I can answer that, Zach. So I think my family has been a huge, huge role in how I view mental health, because they were who I was around when I was younger, like pretty much all the time. And I feel like we take a lot of, or like we look to the people around us to know how to act. So my family in particular, like I spoke on this a little bit earlier, but I'll just elaborate now. We would never talk about anything that you were feeling, and everything was just private, and everything was left unspoken. And this might be something that some of you guys resonate with, maybe some of you don't, but um my family just didn't talk about things. And so therefore I became like that. And with my friendships, I wouldn't discuss my feelings, and it was just a bad cycle. And I feel like you have to take active steps to deconstruct that. And like the first thing is to realize that there's a problem. There's a problem in how I'm dealing with things. And I think that I saw it, especially through like my father's relationship with me, and about how he wouldn't talk about anything. He would just, but yeah, I think that family plays a huge role. And it's definitely an important thing to think about, because family has such a huge impact on how you think about things. And sometimes those are healthy habits and sometimes they're not. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Jamie. Would anyone else like to jump in here, talking about their experience with their family, or, talking about how if parents or close family members may have stigmatized, mental health, what you've done over the years to try to overcome that stigma?
Yeah, I think it kind of relates to like what I was gonna say. So I was gonna say like from a young age, I think a lot of boys are taught that like your emotions should be like suppressed. And it doesn't matter if like the feelings are like love or sadness or fear or anything. Like I think that you just need to like kind of talk about that stuff and how we are taught from such a young age to just like rub some dirt on it, like shrug it off, it'll be okay, like throw some ice on it, you'll be fine, like even if it's physical pain. So, I mean, for me to answer like the previous question, I think the hardest thing for me is that there is like a big stigma around men's mental health in general, and then even more so like in sports. And relating to what Ryan said, like I we've got like 90 to 110 guys in the locker room for football in college, and like that's a lot of testosterone to be around, you know. So I think it's hard to know that other people are struggling too, and they also don't like feel safe enough almost to talk about their story, and that just kills me, like just they feel afraid, and nobody should have to feel like that if we want to um normalize this conversation.
Certainly, I think one of the major barriers to opening up and talking to people about what we're going through is our perception that we're going to be stigmatized, our perception that we're going to be judged. And we have that fear that really creates this wall for opening up. So, Andy, I want to, shoot a follow-up question to you, and then, come to Ryan, because you both talked about the clubhouse and the locker room atmosphere. But either of you guys, when you either opened up about a personal experience, or a friend or a teammate opened up about their personal experience, did you ever experience, or did you ever see your teammates face repercussions from sharing their stories with other people?
um it's hard to say that like you see those repercussions, because I feel like you feel it more than anything. And I guess like when I first started talking about it, it was just with one of my close teammates, and the relationship that grew between the two of us like grew exponentially because we were able to talk about those kind of things and have those conversations. Um, but I think that people are more afraid than anything to like viewed as weak, especially in a sport. And I think that having those conversations can actually build relationships and build teamwork. And like obviously, in turn, being an athlete, you want to perform at the highest level. And I think the only way to perform at the highest level is to have those relationships with other people in the locker room.
Yeah, I think I mean, when you touch on it, are the repercussions, I don't know if it's necessarily that. I think what I've seen is it's all about the relationship you have with the person, because if someone opens up to someone that they're not really close to, I mean, you know how it is with guys, like guys talk smack. And the last thing you want to do is open up to someone that is going to go behind your back and go talk smack about you. So I think it is very healthy to share with people, but you got to understand the company that you're around so that they can help you, because it's not, you're not sharing your story or telling someone how you feel so that they can go talk smack. You need help. That's why you feel inclined to share your stories, because it's, and so when you do it with the right person, I think it can go a long way.
Yeah, so it's kind of this fine line between sharing, but also entrusting the people closest to you with that information, and surrounding yourself with those people that you can trust. What about Jordan or Brendan? Similar question.
Go ahead, Brandon.
You go, Jordan.
Thank you. I think for guys, I think when it comes to our support system, so as guys, our go-tos when someone is struggling aren't always the healthiest choices. And that can kind of fall into whether or not we want to open up. So breakups are a perfect example of this. Because I remember a buddy of mine went through a breakup and all of his friends said, "Hey, let's go out and celebrate. Let's get drunk. We're happy for you." And the girl, she processed things. She felt her feelings. She talked it out. She had the support of her friends to just know that she wasn't okay in that moment and to show emotion. And for my friend, it was, well, let me just suppress all of that really quick so I can seem like the tough, strong guy and not see anyone cry, not let anyone see me crying. And so I think it's part that support system. It's important to have someone that you can trust, who you can be honest with and know that they're not going to judge you for it. But also, too, I think as guys, we also have to come up with better ways to cope with a lot of the things. So, again, kind of go into that same the breakup. I also had a friend who went through the same thing, and he called me. He's like, "I don't understand why I can't just get over this. Why can't I just let this go?" I told him, "You're not supposed to just get over things. You have to feel those feelings, and it's not a great thing. I don't want you to have to feel that, but you are going to cry. You are going to struggle. But I'm here, and I'll listen. You can vent to me all you want." But you still have to feel those feelings and not just push them all the way down and pretend like you're going to celebrate by drinking. So I think when we can get to a healthier place of listening and then also knowing how to support that friend as well, I think that's an important place that we need to get to as men in this society.
I'd agree with everything that everyone said, and Jordan, creating an environment or choosing an alternative than going to the pub, with someone who has, isn't doing so well, or engaging in behaviour that is really about, sort of pushing that thing behind and getting in front of it. And there are some comments in there about, trying to create an environment and getting people to open up. And one of the insights that I would always give to anyone who is concerned about someone is the power of observation. So the simple fact that your friend wants to continually go out and bury what they're going through by engaging in risky behaviour or drinking or taking drugs, whatever it might be, are probably a good indicator that they're not doing so well. In the same way that if you have a friend who is always the first to turn up to a party, or is not returning your calls when normally they do, the power of that observation in acknowledging why you're concerned about them can be huge. Listen, is everything going okay? I notice you haven't been yourself lately. No, I'm fine. Really? You haven't been returning my calls. It's just not like you. That creates a really powerful platform. And then you close your mouth and you listen. We always try and fill that silence, because we're uncomfortable with it. But if we can be disciplined and just make that observation and then sit back and give that person a chance to open up and release themselves of some of the things that are going on in their head. You don't have to have the answers, by the way, but it can be hugely, hugely powerful. It can change the game for them.
It's amazing what offering yourself up as a resource can do, or even just lending an ear, being there to listen. It's such a fast-paced world. We often just don't have the time to sit back and think and listen. And I know a lot of people really value and appreciate someone who's gonna sit there and hear them out for a little while. Jordan, you talked about breakups, which I conceptualize a breakup as kind of like an emotional injury, right? It can be really difficult to get through a breakup, especially when you've had such a close connection with someone and you've been together a while. We have a question from one of the audience members, specifically about sports and how you cope with injury in sports. So, I'd like to pose that to Ryan and Andy, but also to open up, a broader question about how all of you cope with really difficult, things that present themselves in your life. So maybe we can start with Ryan and Andy and then, move through, the rest of the panelists.
Yeah, I have been injured before. I actually broke my back my freshman year of college, and so that was not fun. But um, so I kind of turned to scripture. That was my way of dealing with the emotions that I had, and I had a great group of men around me, not just young kids. Like my coaches were very supportive. I was open and honest with them, and yeah, I mean, diving into the Word is what really propelled me to become stable emotionally, and then at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. I c- I 100% agree with Ryan. That's also something that like helps me as well. But injuries were one of the big reasons why I stopped playing football. Um, I've had multiple concussions, and like having that experience and knowing what like professional football players have gone through like with CTE and stuff like that, like it's a dangerous game, and I didn't want to put my future health at risk, and especially my mental health. So I think that like with other injuries as well, you just really got to lean on those other people that are around you, like try and build that support system and have those people that are going to like push you to go to PT and like push you to keep working through your injury and be serious about it too, especially concussions. Concussions, it's a dangerous game, You don't want to mess around with that kind of stuff.
Jimmy, what about you? What do you do to cope with difficult things that present themselves in your life?
Yeah, so I think for me, like many other people have said, talking about it is huge. It's like the whole basis of how I process things. Like if I don't talk about things, then they don't really then I can't process them. And I think that if you really want to be open with other people, the first thing that you have to do is being open with yourself. And that means like accepting, okay, like I feel sad because this happened. I feel angry because this happened. And it's okay to let yourself feel these things because that's part of being human. And I think that growing up as a guy, like I was always told to like reject that and just like be strong, be tough, whatever, no sweat. And I became this person who just like lived day to day, not processing anything, like all of my issues, all of my trauma, like just built up. And it was just like pressure and pressure and pressure. And living like that, it's not sustainable. Like we're not supposed to just keep all of these things to ourselves. So when I really started to find the value in being vulnerable and the value of being open, it's like slowly like that pressure started dissolving. And obviously it's not some linear process where it's like, yeah, if you talk about things, everything will be easy, everything will be fixed. Like it's not some kind of band-aid. But what I'm trying to convey tonight is that it's a great starting point, and it's been really helpful for me to just talk about things with people who want to listen. And there are some instances, like I know that people will really try to give advice, but sometimes advice is not what you need. Sometimes you just need someone to listen to make sure that what you're feeling is normal and you shouldn't be alienated for it. So yeah, those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, and a related point, we have a really good question here from Colin, and I'll pose this to Jordan and Brendan. But we've spent a lot of time tonight talking about the importance of sharing and opening up. But what does that really look like, and what is the first step in order to be able to actually open up to somebody, whether that's a parent, a cousin, a friend, a therapist?
Look, I would say if your worries about opening up is something that keeps you awake at night, talk to your therapist about a strategy. there's no harm in talking to someone about, what those anxieties are. And there is no bigger demonstration of trust if you're struggling than to reach out to someone and tell them about it. It says to them, I trust you enough to tell you about where I'm at in my life. And it's an absolute privilege in a lot of ways. It's not easy, but it's a privilege to be on the other end of that, and then to help that person navigate a way through. And as Jimmy said, it's not about offering advice or trying to fix things. In fact, if you give them a list of things that they need to do to fix it, it might actually put them under more pressure. But I mean, I guess if I use my own experience, and I'm sure my colleagues would support this, if I'm overwhelmed, I put my hand up and I say, listen, I'm overwhelmed at the moment. And the amount of support that comes around me is, it's phenomenal. That was scary because at first you're thinking, shit, if I actually show that, sorry, language, if I actually show that I'm, struggling and human, is that going to, impact on my ability to progress my career? And no, it doesn't. It builds respect. Not everyone will get it. That's okay. There's still people don't get it yet, and it takes time. But it's almost this big relief valve when you've opened up and you've actually had someone who has listened, not giving you anything other than their ears, as you said, Zach. Two of the greatest resources that we have on the planet, and probably two of the most underutilized resources on the planet, without a doubt.
Thanks, Brendan.
Yeah, I think I think that's what's, and everything that, gosh, this has been so good. I'm like, I just listening to everyone and the points that all of you have made has just been awesome. I think that being vulnerable ourselves opens up the conversation for other men. So like, I'm thinking about the line of students who comes up after a presentation, and sometimes they have personal questions. Most times they just want to share. The overwhelming amount of conversations that last more than 10 minutes are guys. And they wait until the end. They come and talk to me and they share about things that they don't want their other friends to see them talking to me. I've also had men who know exactly what I do for a living, know what I speak on, and will take me to the side and say, hey, Jordan, I just want to let you know I have this going on. I just don't want it to get out there. I just want to let you know. And, I appreciate what you do. So I think we still have to get to that place where, yes, other men can see what we're doing and using our voices and opening up about our mental health. And I think that does allow others to then use their voice as well. So I think that's a really important part of all of this, is us being able to open up. Me personally, there are days where I'm definitely overwhelmed with everything that's going on, especially now. And so talking to my therapist about things, he does this one thing I hate where I can't move on to another subject until I talk about the root of the problem that I don't want to talk about. But I have to. I have to get that out there. I have to feel those emotions. I have to go through the process of talking about what I'm struggling with and how I'm going to cope with it that day. So that's how I look at taking care of my mental health. That's how I look at communicating that to others. And I always enjoy talking to other people who want to share that with me. But whenever I'm talking to my friends, we do this thing where we say, is this a share or do you want advice? 9 times out of 10, it's just a share. And I'm here for that all day.
Thanks so much, Jordan. We're in the formal Q&A period, although we've been in an informal Q&A period for the last 30 minutes or so. There are so many great questions. There are a few more I want to get to, and a few of them are related. So I want to pose an open question to the panel, not necessarily direct this at anybody specific, but please feel free to jump in if you feel comfortable. We have several questions related to what women can do specifically in terms of being allies, supporting and uplifting and encouraging men to open up.
I'm happy to start on that, Zach, if you like. I guess if I look at my own experience, I have a very big family. I've got 7 sisters and 5 brothers, which is nuts, really. It's a very, very big family, and even in modern times. My wife, Tanya, has been an absolute bedrock of support and encouragement, and she doesn't actually even know it. She helps to keep me afloat and check in when perhaps the gravity of a conversation with a stranger or the weight of a crisis intervention or exposure to grief or loss is creeping up to bite me. She's incredibly good at steering me towards perhaps a better outcome. I suppose I'm a massive believer in this sort of idea of social scaffolding, and that's this thing that we've all got around us. So we've all got a massive role to play in supporting the men, the boys and men and girls and women in our lives. I would say to anyone who listens, it's really important for all of us, but for guys and for girls, to respect the importance of social connection and maintaining broad relationships and encouraging your partner or your brother or your dad or whomever it might be, your colleague, to stay connected with their mates. I can't reinforce how important that is. As we get to, so I'm 43 years of age. I've got the filter on, which is probably why I look a bit younger. But as we get to our mid-40s, like, blokes aren't as good as keeping that social scaffolding in place. Girls are much better at it. And so I would say any opportunity you get, encourage that connection. And I think that would make a really big difference. We otherwise we fall off the radar. And then when we get in strife, those relationships are harder to pick up. A month becomes a week, a month becomes 6 months, becomes 2 years, but becomes 5 years, and we've lost contact with really important people in our lives, because that's just what happens, and we've got to get better at it. And I know my wife is incredibly awesome at encouraging me to keep those connections strong in the same way that she does. She's a genius at it, but she encourages me, and it's fantastic. I respect and those relationships so much more than I ever knew, because I know how important they are to me, because they're the first guys there when I need them.
Really great perspective, Brendan. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I think it's all about being able to trust someone. I know for me and my experiences, my fiance has been, I can be honest with her, I can be truthful, and when I do that, then she understands like everything. And she understands when it's good, when it's bad. And so if I am struggling a little bit, she understands, okay, how can I help? She just kind of takes it upon herself to try to take, for lack of a better term, take the burden off of me. And so I think that's what a great partner can do. And yeah, that's been my experience, and it's been awesome.
I just wanted to say real quick what Brendan said. You helped me have an epiphany tonight, because I couldn't figure out why my wife would randomly say, "Hey, can you text such and such and say thank you for whatever it was? Or can you tell such and such happy birthday or congratulations into getting into law school?" And I couldn't figure it out. Like, why would I just text randomly one of my friends and actually talk and congratulate them about things? And that's a great seed to plant, of just reaching out to friends and having that conversation. I'm going to thank her in a few minutes, but thank you, Brandon. Thank you for sharing that. That was actually really awesome to to understand just now.
So we have a question from Duke here, and it's another general question that I want to pose to everybody. But, how do you address this stigma as expressed by those who don't want their friends to know? And Jordan, this question was you directed at you, but if anyone would like to answer, please jump in.
Yeah, I think there's the stigma of, it's not even just the emotions and feelings of the stigma, but then the stigma of talking about that and being the vulnerable part of it. I think for men, one of the things I had to accept is I would put expiration dates like on feelings of like, all right, well, I went through this, so in 2 months I should be over it and moved on. I went through a breakup. It's been 3 weeks. I should kind of be over this and just not have to cry or not be sad. I should be out enjoying life again. No, I realize I could, that's not the way life works. That's not the way mental health works. And it can be difficult of who to trust and who to talk to because of that stigma of men thinking, all right, just get over it. It's fine. It's been this long now. So you should be okay. I think it is finding that right group, that right friend of who to talk to. And doing so in a confident way can be difficult at first. I know it was for me, but the more I understood that this is what I need to do, this is what I have to do for my own mental health. It may be by me sharing, it helps one of my friends too if they go through something. Um, it's something we're still getting there with. Again, I think it is being normalized by a lot of people, especially when you look at celebrities and athletes of men coming out and talking about anxiety, talking about meditation. Like just the fact that we have athletes just on a national, global scale talking about these things. It's awesome, but still there's that stigma that people are going to feel. I'm glad we're making progress, and I understand that can be a struggle for a lot of people still.
So I think we probably have time for one more question. It's hard to believe that the hour is almost up. I feel like this conversation could go on for another 2 or 3 hours, and we would have more than enough content, more than enough to share, and the questions continue to come in. So I just want to reiterate that everyone's question is super important. And at the end of the panel, the panelists, we're going to send out some resources, and the panelists' contact information is going to be a part of those resources as well. So hopefully they'll be able to continue to answer your questions after the panel has ended. But I want to come back to Jimmy because there's a question that is specific to high school, and this is from Roma, and they ask, how do you really encourage men and boys in high school to begin talking about their mental health and to open up?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I think that for me, I learned a lot from seeing positive role models in terms of other friends, but that role model can really be anyone who shows you that being vulnerable is a strength and that it's an act of courage to share your feelings and your thoughts. So, um, I think there's definitely like a dichotomy between like the kids in high school who will the guys in high school who will talk about their feelings and then the ones who won't. And there's no like it's not like one side you're good and then one side you're bad, but it's something that I think that I've had to work through because I used to be one of those guys who just didn't talk about anything. And yeah, I think when I saw like adults or like seeing like older guys and also seeing people in positions of power, like kind of what Jordan was talking about, like when you see people who you look up to accept that being vulnerable is an act of courage, like that's when I started to internalize it for myself. And I think it's really important that people from all ages start talking more about mental health and start talking about opening up about their experiences because it really makes it easier for everyone else to do it. Because one of the biggest barriers is that fear of ostracization and fear of like you're not normal or like you shouldn't be so emotional. And we really need to dismantle that to have a healthier life. Yeah. So I hope that
And
answered your question.
to go off of
Sorry.
that, no, you're fine. To go off of that, I personally like didn't really start talking to anybody about like my own mental health until I got to college. And I think that lifted a big weight off of my shoulders. I felt more open and like more willing to talk about those kinds of things. But if anybody wants to have like a good book to read about vulnerability, Brene Brown wrote a book called Daring Greatly, and it talks about vulnerability and how it is a strength. And by putting yourself out there, you can really establish new connections with people and build on the connections that you already have. So I think vulnerability is like one of the biggest misconceptions around mental health and just the world in general. You know, like if you're willing to put yourself out there, great things can really happen.
Great suggestion, Andy. Thanks for that. So we only have about 2 minutes left, and in these final 2 minutes, I just would like to kind of quickly summarize some of the points that we talked about today. One topic that came up frequently was the importance of reaching out to family, friends, teachers, and other peer supports. But too often, men's mental health is not discussed, despite the fact that nearly 30 million men in the United States suffer from clinical depression or anxiety conditions, with millions of others experiencing intermittent loneliness, sadness, and anxiety. For everyone in the audience that has experienced these emotions, know that you're not alone, and you're joined by the panel, myself, and millions of other men who are going through the same thing. Together, we will advocate and support one another as we continue to move in the direction of normalizing mental health for all men across the country. Lastly, I wanted to, I kind of have a cliche, but I wanted to define the word strength, which if you look it up is defined as the capacity of an object or substance to withstand great forces of pressure. There are not too many more pressure-filled and stressful situations than being a man and acknowledging our emotions and acknowledging that we'd like some help. So often men don't seek help or open up about their feelings because we're supposed to be strong and fight through negative emotions on our own. Well, I'd argue that overcoming expectations of others, making ourselves vulnerable, and fighting stereotypes to take the initiative to improve our mental health requires the highest degree of strength. Before we end today, I just want to thank Our Minds Matter and the Hidden Opponent for their efforts in putting this panel together. I also appreciate all the panelists for their participation, insight, honesty, and vulnerability. It was truly amazing. Above all, I want to thank everyone in the audience who attended today. For without all of you, mental health advocacy is significantly diminished. I hope for all of you that tonight was informative, helpful, and inspiring. And like I mentioned a little earlier, all attendees will receive a follow-up email and resources with contact information of the panelists. So with that, I hope everybody has a great night and a happy Thanksgiving for those who celebrate. So thanks again. And, hopefully we'll see everybody soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. It's a pleasure, honor.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks to Our Minds Matter. It was great to be involved. Take care, everyone.